Indeed they have.
Before we get started, right here.
Give me 1 second, Kevin. So I'm going to talk directly here to do the introduction, and then after that, we'll just talk here. Okay. Like I say, keep an eye on me a little bit for that break, so we can just, we'll just keep going. I'll just do we'll be right back with more with Governor Herbert after this, and then we'll just go right in. And yeah.
Sounds good to me.
All right then. I am. We certainly consider ourselves very fortunate here in Park City, Utah, to have somewhat of an outsized attention paid to us, even though we're essentially a tiny little mountain town. Today, no different in that regard, in that we're very fortunate here at Park City Television to get to spend some time with Utah's Governor, Gary Herbert. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Nice to see you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Great to be here in Park City.
It's, I have to start out with a question that, in chatting with my good pal Henry Glasheen, the chairman of the Summit County Republicans, he pointed out that unlike some of the stereotypes about Park City and how we're all hippies and liberals up here and that sort of thing, that you actually in this past election carried Summit County against your Democratic opponent, who actually is at the very least a sometime resident of Park City. Talk a little bit about your reflections on being the winning candidate here in Summit County.
Well, thanks to those who supported our campaign, and thanks to those here in Summit County who support the Herbert administration. I think it's indicative of the fact that good common sense and good outcomes are appreciated by all people, regardless of where you sit on the political aisle. And we've had some great outcomes. When you look at the economic development that's taken place, we're now up to 4% growth rate, 2.5% greater, 2.5 times rather, greater than the national average. Unemployment rate is dropping. The fact we're putting more money into education. We gave recognition to Park City High School for their success with ACT and AP courses, etc. So I think there's an appreciation for good results, and we're getting good results, and so I would like to think that all the counties of Utah support the Herbert administration, and they did this last election.
They did indeed. Let's talk a little bit about a couple of issues that are very near and dear to the hearts of the folks here in Park City. And the first one that I know that you've been very attentive on and active on is water quality. I understand that you recently had the summit, is that correct?
Well, we had a conference we have every year. There's a number of different conferences with some of those involved in water throughout the state of Utah. But we're going to have a water summit later this year and really kind of reset the dial when it comes to our projections for the future. We want to make sure that for the next 50 years that we do whatever is appropriate to make sure we have water. Water is the only limiting factor to the growth of Utah, and we are a fast-growing state, so water is the lifeblood. And so we're going to have a real hard, frank, open discussion about our future when it comes to water here in a water summit, probably sometime around September.
Do you feel as though there are a lot of states, a lot of areas in the western United States for which water is already a huge and maybe behind the curve issue? Do you feel like here in the state of Utah that we're in a good position in terms of maybe being a little bit ahead of the curve with respect to, like you say, the long term, the next 50 years or so?
You know, water's always been an important issue for Utah. We're an arid state. When the pioneers came here, you know, they saw an arid state and thought, well, there must be a way if we roll up our sleeves and work together. They were able to capture the snowmelt, build reservoirs, canals, ditches, and irrigate. And we've been doing that since the beginning, and the pioneers said, we'll make the desert blossom as a rose. And they've done that. We need to continue to have that same kind of can-do attitude. You know, we have a Slow the Flow campaign where we're trying to do more conservation. Right. And we had a reduction of 25% by the year 2050. Well, I say we're doing well enough. We ought to reduce that. We ought to slow the flow by 25% by 2025. And so we're going to do that. And we're going to then reset and say, what do we need to do to make sure we have viable water and take pains to conserve where we need and do better there, particularly in southern parts of our state where we even have more arid climate. make sure we develop where we can and where we're capable of, and optimize our utilization of our water to accommodate the growth that surely is going to happen here in the great state of Utah.
No question. So here's already a hot button topic for folks in Park City, and I think you and I are unified in that there is a good reason for both of us to have a little bit of a closed lip for a bit in terms of Ski Link. I'm very careful about what I say about Ski Link. It's early days. There are heavy, heavy emotions on both sides already, and I noticed that there was a quote, a very nicely played, careful quote, actually on the skilink.com website, coming from you as far as your general support, and I use that word very easily, but of the idea of a link between resorts, how that can be good for economic development in general, but the jury is out in a lot of ways. Talk a little bit about your feelings and your position at this point. Well,
as we all know, we have one of the best places for outdoor recreation in the world here in Utah. We tout the fact we have the greatest snow on earth, and we do.
We do.
And I'm just with people here in town now from Colorado who even agree we have better snow. So,
good to hear.
Yeah, really, I think people do recognize we have a uniqueness here and a convenience to get to the slopes here in Utah that you can't find many other places in the world. So we have opportunity to optimize that. The idea of connecting our ski resorts to make it easier to get from one to the other without having to get in our automobiles and drive around the mountain certainly has some appeal to it. But it has to be done in such a way that we don't impact negatively the environment, our watershed, our flora and fauna out there. There's probably a right way to do it, and there's probably a wrong way to do it. Ski Link itself is kind of a brand and a specific that I'm not ready to endorse. The concept, I think, is one that needs to be explored. I at least have heard that they're talking in terms of not now selling the property to the private owners, maybe having some kind of easement or right-of-way. Again, making sure we protect the environment in the process. That's something that ought to be explored, but the jury is still out. Is it the right thing to do? Is it a good thing to do? There's certain aspects of it that I think we all could say that would be a good thing. But we need to be cautioned about rushing into it without probably being methodical and thoughtful about the potential outcomes, which might be negative. So let's weigh and consider that in a thoughtful way, and I think we can come to an agreement and build some consensus as far as what we should be doing.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk about the recent legislative session.
Great.
We're here with Governor Gary Herbert. We'll be right back after this break. Please stay tuned to Mountain Views on Park City Television. Let's just go.
You guys tell me where to get that first.
Sure.
Smile. Ready? Go.
We're going to get copies of these, aren't we, Elise?
Take care of you.
All right. Good. Put it on our Facebook.
I know I've been taking one right now.
Welcome back to Mountain Views. I am pleased to be sitting with the governor of the great state of Utah. It's Gary Herbert. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
If you would, give your reflections on the recent legislative session that's just been completed, highlights, maybe lowlights, and kind of where you see things from your chair.
Well, I think it was a good session. The number one issue is the budget. Sometimes we forget that's really why they're coming back into session. Their number one priority is to make sure that we spend the monies that we have available appropriately and that prioritization takes place. And I think they did a pretty good job of that overall. There's always a few funky bills that come along and that cause some concern. But there wasn't a whole lot of drama this time, and so I think overall it was a good session. A lot of new freshman legislators that really got their feet wet their first time and contributed in a significant way. New leadership in the Senate with President Niederhauser, who did an outstanding job. Veteran leadership with Speaker Lockhart in the House. And I think there was a collaborative effort that was outstanding. I'm extremely pleased with the fact that we prioritized correctly when it comes to education. Over $300 million of new money that's going to be going into education. And for me, it's all about economic development, and clearly we cannot have long-term sustained economic growth if we don't have a skilled labor force. That means education. So I am very much appreciative of that. The embracement of my goal of 66 by 2020, meaning that 2/3 of our adult population will have some kind of post-high school certificate or education degree, again, raises the bar in Utah and provides a pathway forward to have continued economic success. And that's, I mean, the highlights, I think, of the legislative session, and we all should feel good about what they did.
Indeed. If you would, since we're kind of in the midst of what's going to happen with HB 76 and the concealed carry without a permit, you vetoed already, I believe, and there's a question now as to whether or not the session will come back up to override the veto. Your thoughts in general on the bill? Obviously, you vetoed it. By the same token, it's an interesting consideration as we sit here today at the end of March in the year 2013.
Well, I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. Most people in Utah are. And I'm a concealed weapon permit holder myself, have been for many years. And part of Utah's culture is certainly the right to bear arms is a part of our nature. That being said, we've evolved to the point over a number of years that have got us to where we have this concealed weapon permit requirement. You want to carry open, that's okay, but if you want to carry concealed, you need to have some additional training, take a class, and get a permit. It's served us very well. In fact, it's been a model for most of the states around the country. We have a lot of people that come to Utah to take the class and get their permit because we have reciprocity with 34 other states. So it's kind of the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's worked very well. I saw no reason to change it. We're going to keep the status quo, which doesn't take anybody's rights away from them. Certainly it's constitutional. And the argument of trying to accommodate hunters up in the mountains that in inclement weather need to put a coat on, you know, I just don't think washes with me as far as the need to change policy.
Completely change the law.
Broad-based. So I vetoed the bill, and I think it's the right thing to do. I have a role to play, and that's part of it. And so I didn't think this was good policy based on our historical evidence. And we'll just have to wait and see. The legislature usually will wait until I finish my 20-day period of signing or vetoing bills, which I think is up on around April the 4th. I'm sure they'll take a look at it, decide whether they want to come back into session and try to override it or not. I would hope that in time that they'll see the wisdom of the veto and choose not to override it.
I think it points out to me something that goes right back to the beginning of our conversation in terms of the way that people, I think, want to stereotype a little bit, certainly in national politics, maybe a lot less so in state politics and governance, that you're a far more moderate, thoughtful governor than a lot of people might like to paint you. Talk a little bit about that, kind of that difference in reality versus what people think.
Well, that's a good observation. I'm a pretty conservative guy by principle, but I try to be moderate in tone. I'm respectful for people who have different points of view. I'm not offended if you have a different point of view on policy than I do, and I hope you're not offended that I have a different policy view than you do. We ought to work together and understand each other better. And so I tend to be more inclusive in my process. I try to bring people together to get a consensus built and then get the right outcome. I'm not a knee-jerk reactionary kind of a guy. I'm probably one of the more conservative governors we've had in recent memory. But I also, with the role of governor, you have to take a little broader view of things that take place and maybe more elevated view. You hear people talk about the 30,000-foot level view. I'm the governor of all of the people of Utah, and my constituency is statewide. And Republicans, Democrats, Independents, you know, are my constituency. And so I try to represent them accurately, and certainly based on a set of principles. Now, campaigns are what campaigns are, and I think there's been some distortion, mainly through campaigning and accusations made that actually are not true, and misrepresentations. And that's part of the distortion that happens in the marketplace. Over time, people get to know me better and better and better and recognize that I'm a principled conservative, Ronald Reagan Republican, but pretty inclusive and moderate in tone in how we try to develop policy for the state of Utah going forward. And clearly it's working. Look at the outcomes we're receiving. More money for education, an economy that's one of the healthiest in America, unemployment rate that's dropping, infrastructure is being built, protection of our water system, and anticipating not just short-term goals but long-term goals, having the lowest cost health care in America, and one of the rated 5 or 6 best quality in America. So in every measurable category, we're getting some really good outcomes. And I'm pleased and grateful for that.
And certainly the spirit of Ronald Reagan in terms of that era of the Republican Party, not only successfully, but also in terms of being more at a moderate point, representing more of America, certainly is something that resonates nowadays.
Bringing people together. Ronald Reagan said this, and I think it's something that all of us should listen to and learn and believe. If you agree with me 80% of the time, you're my friend. We have too many one-issue oriented folks out there that if you disagree with them on one issue out of 100, you know, they're ready to throw you out. And we need to be a little more tolerant of each other, a bigger tent that most of us can fit in. And if we do that and work together, we're going to have some really great outcomes. And Utah is leading the nation in most of those areas. And people are looking to us as a good example. So again, we've got great people in Utah, which is why we have a great state.
Indeed. Well, I understand that you have a few of your gubernatorial colleagues in town this very minute and that you're needing to spend some time with them. So I'll draw this to a close by saying thank you so much for spending time with us.
Well,
Great to see you, and I hope that we have a chance to chat by the fire again soon.
We have 5 governors in town and some other folks that support the Republican Governors Association, and so they're out skiing on the slopes and
Fantastic.
And doing a lot of fun things and dropping a few dollars in the Summit County coffers.
And we moved some things around so that we had a bluebird day on the slopes today. So.
Well, good. Well, it's great to be with you. And again, I can tell you we're going to bring these governors and corporate people back here every year. This is just a wonderful venue, and we're just happy to host, and they're happy to be here.
Fantastic. Great to see you. Safe
Thank
travels. It's Governor Gary Herbert. So great to have him with us here on the Mountain Views program. Quick break. More of the program right after this. Stay tuned. There you have it.
All right, great.